Hi everyone, this is Carrie Campbell, Community Engagement Facilitator at The Journey, and today we are bringing one of our programs to you, Inspire. So we're going to be doing Inspire virtually. That way you'll be able to still take part in our program. We miss being able to see every one of you and being able to work together in person, but for now, we hope that this keeps us well connected. So we'll start by explaining a little bit of what I have been working on. As some of you might know, Inspire is a program where we couple a wellness activity along with an art activity. So focusing on my own wellness a lot lately, I've been doing a lot of sketching and a lot of watercoloring, just simple paintings of things that have been making me happy. Another thing I've been doing is planting a lot. So these leaves and pots are actually based on actual items that are in my kitchen at home. I've been planting plenty of things, including sunflowers and orchids, which is why I chose today to paint this picture, which is of some orchids that are also in my kitchen. I've got nearly 25 plants now, so we've got plenty of references. I also wanted to share a little bit about the materials that I will be using and that you can also easily access. You can go to Michael's, dollar stores for some of your materials as well. Walmart is also a really great place to get good art materials. So this set of paints here comes with 48 pieces, and I got it for around about $30 at Michael's. They're really good quality paints. And I use these brushes that I've gotten from Michael's as well. So the brand of these brushes is Royal and Langnickel, and they are my favorites. I use them religiously. They're a little beat up now, but I will never let them go. Just so you know, whatever brushes you feel comfortable with are fine to use for this process. Anywhere that you can find paintbrushes, where there's a will, there's a way. Now, I'd like to share a little bit with you about the reason why I chose this size of canvas to go with this picture. It's because I think I'll be able to eliminate what I need to. Maybe some of the leaves in the background that belong to a different plant, I might choose to leave them in. This also allows me to scale the painting better. So using this size canvas allowed me to get in the pots and the big leaves and not take anything away from the beautiful flowering tops of the orchids. So I'm going to take a seat now and I'll get started on the first part of our painting, which is going to be penciling in the sketch of the pots and the orchid stems. I also want to touch a little bit on the easel that I'm using. This easel was also purchased at Michael's. I used a half off coupon and I got the easel for $15. Regular price at Michael's, it's about $30. So it's a really just standard easel. It's not one that you would put really huge, heavy pieces that you're working on it, but it's definitely something that can be used for simple paintings at home and also something that you can share with your kids. So it's a really inexpensive easel and it's one that's great to have at home. It's also adjustable, which is what prompted me to mention the easel, is because I'm going to adjust it right now. I've decided that for the sake of time, I'm going to try my best and do this painting in an abstract form. Feel free to be as detailed as you want to for your painting. And also remember that I am the facilitator of the Inspire program. So if you have questions about detail, feel free to comment or reach out to us and we'll be glad to get back to you with help. So here I've kind of I'm focusing on blocking in some of my basic shapes. So you'll see me working on some of the stems. If you notice in the picture, the stems of the orchids are actually being held up by little clips there. And I was debating whether or not to leave them out of my painting. So I haven't exactly decided whether or not I'll be using the clips. But the stems, for the most part, have pretty curvy lines and shapes that you want to make sure are visible in the piece. There's also, I love the orchid leaves because they're really big and have this sort of waxy feel on them they're really, really huge leaves, and they're so sturdy that it's almost odd that they bear such a delicate, beautiful plant. So that's another shape that you definitely want to block in, is the big waxy leaves of the orchids. And it's important to not to go into much detail when you're in this stage. But for someone like me, I have to do somewhat detail in the beginning because I can easily get confused as far as what was the leaf and what part of this I meant to be the stem. So especially if you are drawing from hand, some of your artwork can be used with tracing methods. Some artwork is done with projectors, where it's more easy to pinpoint what exactly goes where. But for the purpose of this abstract painting today, we're not using a projector, and we're simply just going with what we see as the flow of our subject. Also, feel free to leave us comments and suggestions about any subjects that you'd like to see us paint, anything you'd like to see us talk about on Inspire. Keeping in mind that Inspire is not only a painting program, it's not only an art program, but it is definitely geared toward and focused on the wellness of our community members. We care very much about how you feel and how you receive the programs that we put on here at The Journey. So please feel free to give us any suggestions and comments and likes that you feel we should know about. And because the orchid leaves are so jumbled together and they're not very sturdy or standing out, we're gonna kind of really focus on the abstract idea that we're going for with this painting during this time while we're doing these leaves. We really, really don't want to get too detailed with the orchid leaves. However, you do want them to have the feeling of orchids, which again is not very detailed. It's actually pretty loose. Orchids are a pretty loose feeling flower. When painting flowers, it's always important to keep in mind that flowers are often shaped like ellipses, or the middle of the flower is often in the form of an ellipse. Often, when you don't draw too much, or you're not an experienced artist, a lot of people would draw the flower by using a circle that way. And then you sort of would see, here go the leaves coming out and that sort of thing. It's absolutely lovely, but it's not the way you normally would see a plant. So it's okay to have one or two of those in your painting, but you want to really focus on those ellipse. So I've decided on my painting here to keep, actually, I think earlier in the video I was mentioning that I would make my own decision on whether to keep some of these background leaves in my piece. And I decided to leave two of them in, and I've placed them in other areas of my painting. So instead of here and here, they're going straight into the center of the painting. And I left them there because deciding that I needed some background for my painting, these were kind of the best way to alleviate that problem. So here I am now. I'm going to start really soon on working on the colors. So the next step is going to be blocking in the colors. We'll be starting with the green of the leaves. And for this project, I'm going to be working with acrylics, and I'm going to be diluting them with a lot of water. So I'll be doing 1 part water and 1 part acrylic paint, which makes it almost like watercolor medium. The reason for that is because watercolors are probably my favorite ones to use when painting flowers. I think that flowers are, very similar in their tones and their values to watercolor paints. And I really like the, transparency that watercolor also offers. So we're going to be working with the green of the leaves first, and we're going to be doing that really, really light. so that when we choose to put in those really big pops of color on the orchid flowers themselves, we're not taking anything away from that with the background that we've already added in. One thing that I rarely do as an artist is use one shade for anything. One shade of green for the leaf would make it look almost, in my opinion, cartoony, which is not exactly what I'm trying to achieve. I want something beautiful. I want you to be able to make something beautiful, but something that we could hang up in our home and be proud of after. Something that doesn't have to look professional, but that looks like us. And so I'm gonna be using a little bit of deep green. I'm kind of just gonna create a green wheel here so that I can just dabble in them. This is emerald green, which is the one that I don't think I'll need that much of. But when you mix it with yellow, it's really pretty for highlighting. That's a little phthalo green there. You can choose to use less, and you can choose to use different colors. You don't have to use these greens. You don't even have to use green at all, to be honest. You can paint however you'd like. And again, keep in mind, you can reach out to us. You can leave comments. Feel free to ask questions. We'll be happy to respond and give you any sort of like techniques that you'd need. So I'm going to use these darker greens right now. I know I haven't really started mixing it with that much water yet, but that's because, like I said earlier, the leaves of the orchids are so dark and so vibrant and waxy looking that I want to give them the bold attributes that they have in real life. I definitely want to give them credit in my work here. So I'm going to be using these darker parts of green on the orchid leaves. However, the leaf that I chose to leave into my background there, I don't know if you remember me mentioning that it is an elephant ear leaf. It is not an orchid leaf. And that's why I won't be doing it as dark as I'm doing these. They are also against a window in the photograph, so they are against a lot more light, whereas our orchid leaves are much more in the shade of the picture. I use the charcoal pencil for my sketch, and that's a little bit of why the pencil sort of mixes in with the acrylic paint. Some artists do not like that at all. I'm definitely not one of those artists. I actually like when the charcoal mixes with my paint, and I feel like it gives me, I don't know, some sort of like edgier look in my work. So I like it. I like the dirty, rusty look of charcoal. I need a very, very light colored green for those plants in the back, for those leaves in the back of the elephant ear. So I'm just trying to get the lightest green that I can, using the paints that are already on my palette here. So I think a lot before deciding what colors I think would make up the right color in my mind. I find that, or the right color on my work, I find that adding yellows to greens is almost always necessary, especially when painting like foliage and when painting leaves. I also find that there's some really important places where you need to leave the color white. So I definitely think a lot about using light colors because you never know where you're going to need to add in darks or even whites on top of something. So I love mixing lots of colors together, and I am very fond of water when mixing colors because water lets you pretty much level the field with getting the color that you want. So the more water you put in, it's just the more opportunity you have to make the color exactly what you want it to be. when diluting them as much as I am here, it's really important that we work quickly, at least with this part, because the water on the plate or the paint on the plate is drying as we speak. And it's also okay right now that you go over a few of your orchids, because we'll get to the coloring of the orchids. So we'll get to the part where we need to make them stand out. And at that time, if we need to add a little extra color to the pieces of the orchid that are covered by green, then we can deal with that problem and cross that bridge as we get there. For now, though, for the sake of time, we go as quickly as we can with blocking in the colors of the elephant ears. You've got to mix colors and add them. A good way to see the different colors that are in some of our painting subjects is to squint your eyes. I learned that from my painting mentor, that squinting your eyes helps you to see colors like you don't normally see them. And also, I want to point out that many of you know me. A lot of you are also participants of Inspire. And I do often bring my pieces to work with me. So you often know that it does not take me an hour to do a beautiful painting. Many of you know that it takes Carrie sometimes months to complete an actual painting. So please, again, remember, as I've been saying through this entire video, pause me, rewind, fast forward if you need to, comment if you need to, but please do not feel rushed, do not feel obligated to make something breathtaking within the space of this video. We're absolutely here to support you, and please remember that Inspire is mainly about just using art to continue to be well. It's about using art to make sure that we stay connected and that we know we have simple ways to stay happy, right? Inspire is our way of letting you know at the journey that you can make something really nice that you can be proud of. And you don't need to be a professional artist to do that. And you don't need to be a mental health professional to know how to use aesthetics to keep yourself happy. We definitely hope that that is the vibe that you get from Inspire here at the Journey, because you're as important to us as these programs are. You're actually way more important to us than the programs are. We just hope that we're serving you the best that we can by bringing them to you. So for our flower side of the paintings, I am just choosing the right colors, or the colors that I think would best express the vibrance of the plants to me. So for my orangey plants, for the orange colored orchids, we're going to be using the vermilion, orange, and a little burnt sienna. For our pink colored orchids, we're going to be using deep magenta and light magenta. For our white orchids, we'll be using titanium. Titanium will likely be used in highlighted areas across all of the orchids. But for the leaves, we'll be using a little unbleached titanium, and we'll also be using parchment. For our yellow orchids, I've got these 4 colors that I'm really excited to use. They're Naples yellow, which is a great yellow for leaves. Brilliant yellow, which is probably the most used one by myself. Yellow ochre, which will be really interesting on our shadowy areas. And also some yellow ochre deep, which will be really good for the ellipses and the centers of maybe not even just the yellow orchids, perhaps the orange and the white ones as well. I like to just take a step back and look at the painting. I can see some areas like here where I might need to smooth it out a bit. But right now I'm excited to start on the leaves themselves of the orchids. So I'll go into fixing the details of these big elephant ear leaves and the details of the stems around the end of the painting when I get into the flower pots, the 4 flower pots on the bottom. Those are not like my foci right now. Again, for the purpose of the timing of the video, I really want to just show a little bit of how we get the colors to really look like flowers. Again, this is where we're going to be using a lot of water. We're working on the leaves, so they don't have the darkness in colors, if you will, or they don't have the same opacity that the stems and the really broad leaves do. So for that reason, we want as much transparency as we can get. It's always okay with canvas to, add some more. It's probably better to add more than it is to have too much on to begin with and then have to find a way to get rid of some. Especially, I'd say, when you're doing foliage or flowers. I'm going to start with the colors actually one at a time. I'm not going to mix them together and then add the water. I'm going to just take my time and work with the dark magenta first, and then I'll start on the light magenta after. So I'm going to grab my reference photo here on my clipboard so that I've got it to look at. And I'm just going to focus on where I see the deeper colors, the deeper magenta. And I'm going to start adding in some of that in there. Now, the colors will bleed a bit because you're using so much water. I actually like bleeding colors. I think it's pretty cool. So if you don't like bleeding colors, not to worry. You can always just go ahead and dab your brush, dry your brush a little bit so you don't have that same effect happening. I find that when I use charcoal pencil, the bleeding colors tend to get caught in the charcoal, and it gives me a little bit of an edge on my shadow. So I don't really mind it very much. Now I'm going in with my lighter color here, and I realized that I wanted to make the petals a little bit bigger when I was standing back and paying attention to it. So I'm going to go over where I had originally penciled in the size of the petals and use my paintbrush to just broaden them and make them a little bit bigger. So charcoal tends to blend in with water, and it can get very muddy when it comes to acrylic medium or water, anything acrylic or water based. So we want to make sure that if you're going to be using charcoal on an acrylic painting, you should, when you're done, you should definitely spray the painting first with a fixative. So if you're serious about keeping your painting and hanging it up after, fixative is something that you can find at Walmart. You can also find it at Michael's. You can order it at Amazon. Fixative allows you to keep what is on the canvas and then add another layer of something on top. So if you sprayed this canvas with fixative, you would then be able to gloss the canvas without the charcoal smearing all over your paint. So now we're moving on to the next section of basics, which I realized that I actually will need to add more flowers to. It looks like I'm short some petals in the top here. So for now, we're gonna move on to incorporating those other colors. And then when I'm done, I'll take a step back and I'll see what colors I need to add on. I noticed that on the photograph, they're very shadowy, these next ones. So we're gonna be using a little bit of that burnt sienna and maybe even a little bit of blue when the time comes. Because these are in so much shadow, I'm gonna start with the darker color. I'm gonna start with the burnt sienna. So this is where I'm just adding in that burnt sienna because it's gonna be my backdrop for all my other pretty orangey petals. I really want this painting to have an airy feel. I want it to feel the way my kitchen feels, which is quite light and airy and happy. And that's really what I want to get across. I don't want to get across my skills as a painter. I'm not trying to prove that I am, you know, the most detailed, or that this is even the best orchid painting that anyone could have done, or that I could even do. I just want it to be something that makes me feel good about today. And that's definitely my motive and our motive here at The Journey for you. So this painting, when it's done, when it's all done, it will definitely be considered a mixed media piece of art. And the reason that it is a mixed media piece is because it's got a number of different mediums on it. So right now I'm working with acrylic and water. By the time I'm completely done with this, I may or may not throw some oil paint on the very bottom. I was thinking of adding some oil paint onto the leaves here. That would make it a mixed media piece. There's also lots of charcoal going throughout and watercolor pencil, which is another reason why it's not just one medium. That also constitutes it being a mixed media piece of artwork. So right now, I'm still here just kind of basically paying attention to where I think I can add colors that I've already put onto my plates. So I have like a little bit of leftover blue here. Been throwing it in with the pots. They're gray in my photo, but for the sake of my painting, I want to use blue. I am also just experimenting with spots on my painting where I can use the same colors. So I don't know if you can see here where I've got a little bit of yellow that I used on this orchid that I've added into some of the places on the other orchids. I'm also adding some shadow. I'm using this blue, this metallic blue, to just kind of accentuate some shadow areas in the orchids. I've not gotten into these two orchids yet. I've just mainly done shadows in here, here, and here. And I'm jumping around from spot to spot as I try to use my green paint up as it's drying on the plate. For the sake of this video, I am going to make this painting an abstract one, and I'm going to end somewhere soon. If I was doing a more detailed painting, this would definitely take me a few weeks. It would look something like this at the ending of today, and then when I went to revisit it, I'd be really, really focusing on making these orchids look real. And it's important while you're painting to take a step back and to just look at your painting, just to be objective about, you know, anything that you might not like. Again, abstract is the idea here, but there are some parts of the painting that I would like to keep their form, if you will. A stem is a stem, whether it's in a realist painting or in an abstract painting. I want the stem to look like a stem. For today's project, I'm working with the charcoal and the paint, and I'm working from a photo. Photos really capture for you where the light is hitting an item. If you're not working plein air, then the photo enables you to have sort of a uniform collection of light in your painting then. So if I'm looking at this painting and noticing that the light is coming from the top left, then it allows me to also imitate that in my canvas. So in my canvas, I'm also attempting to make it look like the light is coming from the top left side of the room. So for that reason, photos are very, very helpful when you're particular about your lighting and shadows. Tracing paper is another technique that you could use if you want to be especially detailed in your painting. Tracing paper is definitely not as expensive as a projector, and it can be used to pretty much get the same end result. So you'd be just tracing what you want onto the paper, and then you would transfer it onto the canvas. Feel free to leave us some comments if you'd like some demo videos on how to do transfers using tracing paper. We'd be happy to demonstrate that for you as well. So as you can see, guys, I've worked for about an hour, blocking in my basic stuff, and then also working on the details that were important to me. Because that was what is most important for this painting, is that we work on the details that we want to see when we hang it up on our walls. I've thrown some glitter in at the end because I really like glitter in my pieces at home. Glitter makes me happy and it makes things shine. So feel free to throw glitter all over yours if you want to as well. I really actually like the contrast between the upper parts of the flowers, which have a lot more detail and action going on, and the bottom part of the painting that just kind of shows you the 4 pots and gives you the idea that they're sitting on some sort of table somewhere in the world. I hope that you enjoy the end result of your painting. And again, I invite you to connect with us with any questions or any comments that you have. We also invite you to join us for the next Inspire video. And we hope that you've had a great time with us today. Thank you so much for joining. And we hope you have an inspirational week from the Journey team. Bye.